Is this plant like upstaging me? Oops. All right, hello good people of the internet. Today I want to walk down memory lane. The memory, yep, that's definitely a wasp. Today I want to walk through all the books that I read the past few months. It feels like forever ago to go back to February and talk about the books I read in February. It feels like a lifetime ago. I actually did film a February wrap up and then just never got around to editing and posting it. So I'm just adding February's books into here. I did not read a lot in March. April was kind of minimal too. I was sick for like 2.5 weeks of April. So, you know, we're just, we're doing the best we can these days. We're surviving, not thriving. Hopefully May is a thriving, vibrant month. So we're gonna work our way forwards in time. So we're gonna go all the way back to February and work forwards. You may remember reading vlogs posted so many moons ago, but I read Chouette by Oshetsky back in February. This was an enjoyable read. I really loved the writing. I still am kind of mulling over what I think about the kind of analogy or metaphor or kind of what the author intended with this book. So basically it's taking place in a pretty normal world, except that this woman who goes by the nickname Tiny thinks or believes that she's going to give birth to an owl baby, and then she does. But what's a little bit hard to navigate is whether the owl visual is only taking place in Tiny's head or if this is actually a world where the baby is an owl baby. There were a few times earlier on in the story where I thought that maybe it was a metaphor for a child with special needs or developmental delays or something like that, and I think I would have enjoyed the book even more if that had been the case, but as time went on in the book, it kind of didn't end up going in that direction. This book has a lot of great takeaways about motherhood and the bond between mother and child, which I really liked. Yeah, overall it was really enjoyable. It was kind of out there. It kind of reminded me of things along the lines of like Bunny by Mona Awad, just kind of like visuals and things that are sort of unexpected and kind of out there. This by no means was like horror or like thriller. It was much more literary fiction, but gave me similar vibes. That was Chouette. I enjoyed it, gave it around like 3.5 stars. The next book I read was Hunger by Knut Hamson. It was funny that I read this in February because in January I read a book or like a short story called The Blind Owl, and there were some similarities for me with these two books in that we're following a main character and just kind of their like descent into kind of madness. In this book, we're following a man who is a starving artist, basically, in Norway. This was translated from the Norwegian by Sverre Lyngstad, end of the 19th century-ish. Yeah, something like that. And it's basically a man who is just kind of trying to make his way in the city, but he's very adamant about his art being the way that he takes care of himself or the way he makes money. And he's kind of defiant and turned off by any other opportunity to make money, like normal jobs. And he still has this ego where he won't kind of like accept charity from other people. So things are not going well for him because his writing is not being published by newspapers or whatever. Like his proposals are not always being accepted. So he's kind of going through a rough time and he's just not really doing a lot to help himself. Hunger comes from the fact that he goes through long periods of starvation and hunger, and he kind of thinks it's like the artist's journey or like the way to unlock his creativity, and just kind of sees it in a very romantic way instead of the realization that like his hair's falling out and his teeth are bad and he like really needs food. So it's a very interesting commentary on art and kind of ego and the lengths that people are willing to go to kind of save their ego, I guess is kind of what I took away from it. So this was a very interesting read. I really, really liked it. Very beautiful writing in here as well. So this was a good read that I'm glad I picked up. I also saw this originally on Anna Wallace Johnson's channel. I'm her biggest fan, and I think it was one of her favorite books of last year. And then I ended up just like stumbling across it at Barnes & Noble one day. So yeah, I am glad that I picked this up. I'm also glad that I can put it back on my shelf so I don't have to look at this kind of creepy painting anymore for a while. But good book, very good book. Okay, the next thing I read took me on a journey, a multi-month journey, and then there was like a bunch of news and updates about the writer, and I just went on a roller coaster of emotions about how I felt about the book and how I feel about the author. That was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This was my first dive into Sandersonian work. I don't think that's a common phrase that people use, but I have been wanting to give his books a try for so long. So here's the deal. Part of the reason I didn't finish editing my February wrap-up where I originally talked about this was because I filmed that like right before this sort of hit piece article came out about Brandon Sanderson, and I just felt like that additional context of what everybody was saying about him post that article just was helpful for me to add. So basically, I'm not explaining this well, but basically in my previous video talking about this, I was saying how confused I was because I had like never heard anybody complain or criticize or critique his writing before. I had only seen top-notch comments about how incredible Brandon Sanderson is, and his books are like so highly rated on Goodreads. And I finished this and it was enjoyable fantasy. I liked the ideas, but I was just so confused because I was like, did I read the same book? Like, the writing is not good. And I was just very confused, and I wasn't trying to come across as like, I'm not like other people. I have criticism of Brandon Sanderson and nobody else does, but I just like hadn't seen any other critique videos or comments about his writing, so I was just very confused. And then once that article came out, I saw a million videos defending him, but also caveating with like, yeah, we know his writing is not the best. So then I was like, okay, like this is just kind of accepted fact that his prose is not incredible, and that people are here for like his characters and his plots and things like that. Basically, my footage was kind of like outdated to the present topic because those articles came out after I filmed my video, if that makes any sense. So basically, with everything that happened since then with the article and like everybody's comments of like, yeah, we know his writing's not the best, but we love him anyway, I was like, okay, got it. All that being said, this was a journey. I didn't like some of the journey. I liked other parts of the journey. I feel like this could have been definitely cut down, like maybe by 40 or 50%. I don't think it needed to be 1,000 pages. I like the different plot lines that we have going on. It's really hard to explain this book if you're not familiar, but basically there's kind of like, how do I even start talking about this? The magic system surrounds like storms, you know, the Stormlight archives. Stormlight is magic, and then you can like wield the power of storms into like armor and blades and things like that. And then we've got a couple of like major countries at war, so you know, kind of typical fantasy. And then we follow some specific characters in these different worlds. So we follow like a girl who's trying to be a scholar and learn from like another older female scholar, and they're kind of doing like book stuff because in this world women are the main knowledge keepers and the ones that can read and write, and men don't usually do that. And then we're following like an ex-soldier turned slave, and we get his backstory too. And then we follow some characters like in the royalty camps, like during battles and stuff. So I liked, you know, jumping through different plots. I think the political aspect and the characters are enough to keep me going, and I'll still continue with it. But that's not to say that the writing, it made it kind of tough. Like this took me a lot longer than I think it would have if the writing was better. I did finish the last like 200 pages in one day, which was very surprising for me because I'm kind of slow. So the last 200 pages, when everything started to pick up and come together, it was very good and I liked it. But the 800 pages before that, I just think a lot of stuff could have been cut out. I think the most bothersome thing about his writing to me is that he just offers no space for the reader to come to their own conclusions or to make connections in their head. He spells everything out like to the extreme. Like something will happen and then he'll have like 4 sentences of being like, did you see that this connected? That's crazy. It did. And you're like, yeah, I got that before you even started explaining how those things connected. It's just like he doesn't trust the reader to be smart enough to connect things. I'm hopeful. Well, honestly, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be hopeful, but because this was written quite a while ago and he's done so much writing since then, it's possible that could have changed and it's better in the later books. So I'm willing to keep going with these, even though I have some problems with it. I think it's still worth like continuing. I'm also just so curious because I've seen a lot of videos of reactions and comments after like book 2. I think all of them, 2, 3, and 4, like there's major plot twists and big things that people didn't expect to happen. So I think that curiosity plays a lot into this, of just like, I want to see what everybody is talking about. And also because I already bought all the books because they were on sale, so I already have them. And I did like the overall ideas of the book, even if the writing wasn't excellent. So yeah, those are kind of my general thoughts about The Way of Kings and Brandon Sanderson, and I'm glad I'm on the same page with everybody else. Like, we're in agreement that his writing is not awesome, but we like his ideas. Okay, got it. I've got it. Oh, also the other thing that is really bothersome to me are all of the compound words that he created. I made a list of them. Here's my list of compound Sanderson words. High storm, high prince, great shells, chasm fiends. That one probably is the most annoying to me because chasm fiend is the name of like the big monster. Chasm fiend. Horn eater, world singer, shard bearer, right lord, stormfather, glyph pear, pile vine, wind stance, shard blade, creme slime, span reeds, surge binder, honor spren, exhaustion spren, dawn cities, everstorm, stonewalkers. That's not even all of them. Sorry, not sorry, I'm not into the compound word creation thing that he's got going on. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. And maybe other people feel that way. Okay, sorry, I'm done being mean. Also, the other thing about this whole debacle thing is how nice of a person Brandon Sanderson is. Like, his response to the Hit Piece article about him, and the fact that he's like so active on his subreddit. There's a Brandon Sanderson subreddit, and he's like active on there, responding to people and answering questions, and he does his little like YouTube updates, and he watches booktubers. I'm just like, you are so cool and nice. And I wish I liked the writing a little bit more, but I'm gonna keep going. And I also supported him through the Secret Project. So I have Tress of the Emerald Sea on my shelf, and Secret Project number 2 whenever it comes. I'm gonna read them because I bought them. So yeah. Okay, anyways, I'm done talking about him. He's great. He's such a nice person. And also I don't love his writing. And then I'm gonna keep reading. What a weird situation. So anyways, moving on. Then I read The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, and you see it. So this is just a fun little book. Well, fun. I mean, there's kind of some sad things in it too. But this was, I think, his debut, and it follows a group of expatriates after World War I, and specifically following a man named Jake. I think Ernest Hemingway said, like, this is not autobiographical, but it's kind of the most autobiographical adjacent novel that he wrote. This was really good. I read it really quickly, like a day and a half, and it was really fun. I've read A Farewell to Arms, and I really liked that book. So this was my second Hemingway, and I liked it. Yeah, it was very enjoyable. It was a very immersive book. I just felt like I was one of the group, one of the friends going along on these adventures. They go to Spain and watch bull running, the running of the bulls. No. World of bullfighting, not bull running. Yeah, their adventures through Spain, and then they're also in Paris, I believe. Yeah, so it was just very immersive, and it made me want to go to Europe and experience the nightlife of Paris. Anyways, this was very good, very short read, and enjoyed it a lot. The next thing I read was another chunky fantasy that I really liked. For some reason, it took me a long time to finish it. I think it was right in the midst of like sister's wedding, travel. I was kind of in a reading slump, not because of this, but I just kind of didn't really feel like sitting down to read. So it took me forever to finish it. but I really liked it. So that was The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. This is the first in a trilogy, the first Law trilogy. So this is grim dark fantasy. It's not kind of like a lighthearted fairy world. Also, the magic in here was very minimal. There's like a couple of wizard characters, and one character can like talk to fire or breathe in fire and use it later or something like that. But other than that, the magic kind of takes a backseat in this world, at least so far. Also, there's no map at the beginning of this book, which I think that would have been helpful. Also, this is my favorite thing about this book. The giant headshot of Joe Abercrombie. We're just following a couple of different characters in this world. There's Logan, who is from like the north, and he's kind of like a barbarian, like rugged type of guy who fights a lot. And then there's like a captain guy, Luther, Jezal, I don't know how to say it, Jezal Dan Luther. Then we're following a guy named Glokta, who's kind of a cripple, and he works for the crown and like tortures people to get information. So those are kind of our three major people, and then there's a wizard who shows up and kind of brings about this sort of quest. So it was interesting because this first book, a lot of little things happened to kind of understand people's character development and everything. Very much a character-driven fantasy. And then at the very end, it was kind of like, okay, here's our quest that we're going to go on. So I think book 2 maybe a little bit more plot heavy as this sort of quest journey begins. I really liked it. I liked the writing. I liked the characters. I didn't really mesh with like the humor of the people. I don't know. It wasn't very funny to me, but besides that, it had kind of like Game of Thrones-y vibes. I haven't read the Game of Thrones books, but big fan of the show, and it kind of had similar vibes to that. And overall, I really liked it, and I already bought book 2, so I'm looking forward to continuing that. I'm definitely more drawn to continuing this series than Way of Kings currently, but I will try to continue both of them this year. So definitely like this. I gave it like 4 stars. Hello, it is several days later. I somehow lost the footage of me talking about the last few books. So I'm here to refilm. I'm gonna try not to squint too much, but it's very bright out. Let's talk about these last few books from this reading wrap up. I did want to mention 2 audiobooks that I listened to in March. Frank and I, on the way back from Arizona after my sister's wedding, we listened to Happy Go Lucky by David Sedaris. I think this was my very first, actually, let's see, is that true? Yeah, I don't think I've ever read a full David Sedaris book, but I have listened to, I think I've listened to multiple episodes of This American Life when he was like sharing essays or something, so I've heard him share his stories, and they're great. So we decided to pop on Happy Go Lucky in the car. It was just great. If you know David Sedaris, I think it's just his very typical style. He's so funny. He has a great way of just relaying stories in this perfectly witty and seamless way. He talks about his family a lot. He had a very interesting father that he talks a lot about, and different family dynamics with all of his siblings. He is just a fantastic writer. It's a lot of just personal life stories, but he has just such a great way of making them very thought-provoking and entertaining to listen to, and he narrated his audiobook himself, which is always wonderful. So it was really, oh, it's time to be real. So yes, that was Happy Go Lucky by David Sedaris. I think I gave it like 4 stars on Goodreads. The second audiobook from this road trip was the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I have read this before, but I really like it, and I don't think Frank had ever heard it or read it before. Dog hair. C.S. Lewis was a Christian, and he wrote this story called the Screwtape Letters. It's an epistolary, very short little novel. And it's basically these letters written from this demon named Wormwood to his nephew, demon nephew, Screwtape. And he is writing letters to Screwtape, kind of coaching him and guiding him on how to be a better demon. Wormwood is giving Screwtape tips and tricks on how to steer humans away from God, whom they call the enemy, of course, because they're demons. So Wormwood is giving Screwtape advice on how to do that, and he has been assigned like a specific human being to follow and tempt and steer away from God, and there's just a lot of talk on how that is done. If you're not a Christian, of course, you can still enjoy this as a very interesting piece of fiction, but also if you're coming at it from a faith perspective, it's very insightful because C.S. Lewis is basically talking about all the ways that humans are drawn away from God. Things like apathy, complaining, getting angry at your loved ones, and kind of causing disconnect in those relationships, getting apathetic towards going to church or getting distracted by things. So yeah, there's a lot of just great commentary on things that maybe we should look out for. Things that if they become habits, they bring you a lot of unhappiness and dissatisfaction, especially things kind of like complaining and disconnecting from loved ones is something important to be aware of. I really like this book and kind of leaves you with this eerie feeling, but not in a despairing way, but sort of like a, oh shoot, I need to be aware of how I'm living my life and not passive, I think is a great takeaway for it. So that's the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I have 2 more books that I read. First one is Outline by Rachel Cusk. I picked this up at the Books Are Magic bookshop. I almost said magic shop. I had definitely heard Rachel Cusk's name, but I had never read anything from her, and I was kind of randomly picking something as sort of a souvenir from my trip to New York City. Our main protagonist is traveling to Greece to teach a summer writing class there. It just chronicles multiple conversations and connections that she makes along the way. The first one is her seatmate on the airplane, and they get to talking. He's an older gentleman, and they talk about marriage and relationships and life not going the way that you think it will, and sort of regrets in life and everything like that. There was a lot that was really beautiful in here that I underlined, and some of it even made me emotional, which does not happen very often in books. I think what struck me the most, there's a lot to take away from this book, but I think the first chapter or conversation was so impactful for me that that's kind of my biggest takeaway from this book. And there was a lot in there about this gentleman. He was married multiple times, and he comments a lot about just how he didn't feel worried to leave an old life behind or divorce his first wife because he just thought there would always be more and more and more good ahead of him. But what he realized was that's not the case. He says he and his wife had built things that had flourished, had together expanded the sum of what they were and what they had. Life had responded willingly to them, had treated them abundantly, and this, he now saw, was what had given him the confidence to break it all, to break it with what now seemed to him to be extraordinary casualness, because he thought there would be more. More what? I asked. More life, he said, opening his hands in a gesture of receipt. Even though later in the book, this character, she comes across him again, and the way that I perceived him kind of changed based on later events. But during this conversation, I just thought he was so tender-hearted and very vulnerable about his past, and very extremely insightful about the way that he lived his life. So yes, that chapter was probably the most impactful. There's also a chapter later on that is the protagonist talking with some friends about art and writing, which I thought was very lovely and insightful. And then there are a couple of chapters with the protagonist in her writing class and her students kind of talking about observations that they were supposed to write about. I don't know, it sounds so generic to say this book is about love and life and people and relationships, but it really is. And I thought it was really well written. This is definitely very plotless and meandering, but oh, there's an airplane with a sign on the back. But I think Rachel Cusk writes so splendidly and just provides so much insight in a very lovely way to these topics. So I really enjoyed reading it. I'm pretty sure recently I heard that Rachel Cusk, she was so busy like kind of being a mom and lots of stuff happening in her life that while writing this, she would actually write whole chapters or pages in her head and then later transcribe them down on paper exactly how she remembered it. And I thought that was cool, and I'm very jealous because sometimes I think up a single sentence in my head that I'm like, oh, I should write that down later, and then I forget it. Rachel Cusk is very cool. It's also somehow part of a trilogy. There's Outline, Transit, and Kudos. I'm not chomping at the bit to buy those ones and read them as well, but if I happen to come across them or whatever, I would definitely read them and read more from her. So I think I gave this like 3.5, 4 stars. Solid read, good stuff, liked it. And then the last book of this reading wrap up was something I picked up kind of after being sick. I definitely stopped reading for like at least 2 full weeks, if not more than that. I was so sick. It wasn't COVID, it wasn't strep, it wasn't flu A or B, and it wasn't mono. It was like some unknown virus thing. And I'd heard other people get it too. It was like a terrible flu, like very respiratory, like lots of chest congestion, the most sore throat of all time, just like so much fatigue. And then I thought I was getting better, and then I got worse, and then I got pink eye with it, which I hate pink eye. That was terrible, and I was so tired, and I was so sick. Before I like really went downhill, I was gonna try to do like reading challenges and reading as much as possible while I was just like had this little cold. LOL, no, I was just down for the count, either in bed or on the couch watching The Office. And I watched some scary movies, which I might do a video about the movies I watched and just spice things up a little bit on this channel. We don't just read books here, we also watch films, because we are very cultured. Anyways, once I was starting to feel a lot better, I picked up just a quick read. It felt nice just to get a book done and under my belt after being sick for so long and not reading a lot. So I picked up All the Dangerous Things by Stacy Willingham. I think I got this in my December or January book of the month, like the last one that I got. I believe this is the author of A Flicker in the Dark, which I have not read. It was fine. I think I've said this in previous videos, but I think I'm a little bit over contemporary thrillers right now. I just feel like they all kind of sound the same. Unfortunately, I just feel no distinct writing voice from any of the authors that I've read in the last few years. I know this is gonna sound terrible and like really, really mean, but it kind of just feels like all modern thrillers were written by an AI program. They just all sound the same. All the characters have similar names, sometimes the same names. There's just multiple little twisty twists that you can kind of guess, or that are like so out there that you're like, what? I want to get to Gone Girl because I've never read that before, and that's kind of the queen book of thrillers. But as far as other contemporary thrillers, I feel like I'm just a little bit over them. So with this one, we're following a woman. I forgot her name. Actually, we're following a married couple, and I don't remember either of their names. And their child was kidnapped out of his crib. No trace left behind, no sign of a break-in, just nothing. And the case goes cold. And we're following them a year later. Their marriage is kind of falling apart, and the mom has severe insomnia because she just obviously is very traumatized from that and just never wants to give up on finding her son. She's even started to speak at true crime conventions and things like that just to get the word out about her story. She speaks at a convention and then meets a podcaster afterward, and he's interested in doing a podcast series or episode on her story with her son. So they start to kind of form this bond, and he comes to her house. We're also following the storyline of how the husband and wife got together like 7 years ago or whatever. And so those chapters of the past are intertwined with the present story. Oh, we also have chapters from when the wife was a young girl with her sister in her family's house. So there's 3 different timelines and time frames, I guess, of this woman's life. It never felt too slow for me, which was nice. I read it in 2 days and I wanted to see what happened, so it kept me going. So I will give it credit for that. If you just want something fast that keeps you turning the page, that's what it did for me. It was just nothing stellar about the characters or the plot. It was kind of just one of those typical thrillers where, of course, there's a couple red herrings and then there's one twist and a second twist and then a third twist. I wouldn't proactively recommend it as like a good read, but if you got it in your book of the month box, might as well just get through it. That sounds terrible. I'm making this sound so bad. It was fine. I gave it like 2.5 or 3 stars. It was fine for a thriller. I think I'm done with the thriller genre for a while, and I don't think I'll read anything else from Stacy Willingham. That's what I'll say about that. Yeah. Okay, so that's it. We finally made it through everything that I read the last couple of months. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books, and hi Ruby. If you agree with me or if you disagree with me on my comments, and let me know what you've been reading recently. I'd love to know if you've read anything fantastic or terrible. I always like to chat with people about the books that they find terrible. Maybe it's just because I haven't hit anything just absolutely splendid this year in terms of reading, I can't really think of anything so far that's been just outstanding. I hope that changes soon. Yeah, let me know how your reading year is going so far. We're almost halfway through 2023, which is wild. Also, I know I'm a very small channel, but it really helps. Apparently, I'm new to YouTube stuff, but if you thumbs up and like this video and then subscribe and then hit the little bell icon that will notify you every time I post a video. All of that stuff is just helpful for small blossoming channels to grow a little bit more and be shown in more people's feeds as recommended videos. So just a little tidbit there that would very much help my little baby channel. So thank you again so much for the support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.